Well, guys, we are back to another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show, episode 34, and the first one of 2022. So, what do we have to talk to start off the new year?
Alright, Censorship and Entertainment. 2022 Winter Olympics boycott. What good things Biden has actually done. Unrest in Kazakhstan. Trumpster mad, Trump supports vaccines. Benny Boy needs a bottle. Josh Furstein getting COVID-19. And Josh Duggar convicted of child porn.
Oh boy, what an interesting and funny ways to start off the year. So, what do you want to talk about first?
Let's start on Benny Boy being a snowflake.
Oh, this was really funny, as we have not made enough fun of Benny Boy a lot so far on the series. So anyways, Mike did a video on this. Supposedly, California just passed a new law that requires by, I think it was 2024, that all, toy stores have, gender-neutral toy sections. Not every toy section is just limited to, men and women, per se, if anyone knows what I'm talking about. And Benny Boy, he flipped the fuck out on this. So, I hope you're all ready to laugh at stupid people like Benny Boy. So, here we go.
So for those of you who haven't heard, California passed a law mandating big box retailers establish gender-neutral toy sections. Now, Ben Shapiro is going to take issue with this, and for whatever reason, he's apoplectic over this law. It's not really a big deal, and honestly, I feel like this is kind of already a thing in most toy sections, so the law...
Yeah, actually, I've noticed that too. What about you? Because the other day we
were... there are definitely gender-neutral toy sections. Mostly involving Lego, which very initially they actually did have gender neutral Lego, and then they split to try and appeal to more. That didn't work long term, so they've gone back to gender neutral.
I was in Target the other day looking for something, and we went for a toy section in the store, and it seemed pretty gender neutral to me. This seems to be a thing already that stores do on their own, so that's why I think the law honestly was kind of pointless, because they're gonna probably do it anyway. So why do you need to make it a mandatory law for them to do so? It just seems like unnecessary overregulation. But of course, I'm not freaking the fuck out like Benny Boy is right here.
Itself might be a little bit redundant, but we'll talk about that. Either way, Ben Shapiro is big mad, and he's going to explain why this law promotes chaos. This is his words.
Chaos, everybody, for gender-neutral toy sections.
California has now mandated that every big box store in California, this kicked in the new year, every big toy store is required to create a gender-neutral toy section. Why? Why? So the answer that people will give you is, well, we need a gender-neutral toy section for those kids who are having trouble with their gender identity. And so what you're really saying is that gender doesn't exist. Right? What you're really saying is there's no such thing as biological sex or human proclivities that are directed by biological sex or connected to it. Right? That human tendencies are not connected to sex in any way. We can redefine sex.
What?
The whole gender, they claim that gender doesn't exist. That was bloody quick.
I mean, what do you expect? He's an idiot.
Across the biological spectrum, to account for the fact that there are some people who feel uncomfortable. A vast, vast, vast minority. Okay, this is not how you make societal rules. Right? Disassembling basic ideas of the reality of male and female, that is not the way that you promote human happiness. That is the way that you promote chaos.
Benny Boy, I think you're reading too much into this. Dude, why are you making such a big deal about something so trivial? I'm not even necessarily sure I would even support the law to put it out there. But it's not that big of a deal, for crying out loud. And guess what, Benny? And here's something else, Benny Boy, that you conservatives don't seem to understand. Gender is a social construct.
It is.
Not everything is tied to what you are, being a man or a woman. That's what gender...
There was a time when at least night men, used to wear high heels so they could fit in horse stirrups easier.
Or
we dress babies in used to be reverse.
Yeah, just like, the stereotypical, like, blue being the color for men, pink being the color for women.
Yeah.
For all of you don't know, that was actually the reverse until, like, God, like, maybe 100 years or so ago. Cheerleading's like a predominant, like, women thing. That, like, up to, like, 100 years ago was almost just a male thing. So for all of you don't know that, yeah, look that up when you get a chance. Cheerleading was, like, almost all men only, pretty much. And then, of course, what was the one I was bringing up before I got interrupted? There was another one, too, that won't sadly come to my head. But, yeah, no. Damn, I can't remember what it was. But, yeah, it's a social construct. That's like there's different, cultures in the world that have, like, different gender, priorities. For crying out loud.
One of the Asian ones has 5 genders recognized, including a transgender one.
Now I know what I was gonna say. Just like up to 100 years ago, up to like the Victorian era, like in America and Western Europe, like remember like baby boys would wear like dresses growing up. Remember that?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, think about that, guys. Like up to like 100 years ago, it was pretty common. Like, boys would wear dresses.
So it seems like all these gender roles seem to really only be maybe 100 years old at most.
Yeah.
Wonder what happened 100 years ago to cause that.
Here's the thing. Sex and gender are separate. Now, I'm sure some of it may be influenced by sex, but gender still is largely a social construct, and that's why it's not a big deal when people deviate from it, which I know you conservatives do not like, which is why you're having a meltdown over something as trivial as a gender neutral toy section.
And once again, the left does not seem to care about the fact that male and female are pretty rigid categories biologically. When I say
no, they're not.
I mean innately rigid
There are social constructs that different cultures deviate what being a man and a woman is, you idiot.
Categories, and that human activities within those categories tend to fall along somewhat stereotypical lines, and that's not a bad thing. That, societally speaking, that's quite a good thing. That doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions to the rule, and we ought not treat those people with tolerance.
But you don't, though. That's the thing. You don't treat people tolerantly if they deviate from what you pre-describe as what's normal. If someone deviates from it, you have a meltdown over it.
Like you're having right now.
Yeah.
Like,
we should. But that does not mean that you redefine gender entirely. And yet
It's, oh my god, Ben, it's a social construct. It's always been redefined, you idiot. God damn.
Is a positive good. Why? Because there are exceptions, and we have to make sure that all of society is restructured in favor of this small group of people who have a problem with the societal institution.
I don't think even most people have a...
Reform it.
What were you saying?
We just need to reform it to include them.
Like, I don't even think people really make a big deal about, like, gender-neutral toy sections, but they're just trying to do...
Unless they're being Shapiro.
Yeah. Like, most of these places they have them, they're just trying to appeal to people so they don't piss people off. Just like what we talked about in the last episode about the war on Christmas with, like, businesses saying Happy Holidays and saying Merry Christmas. Like, most people are not going to have a big deal if you say Merry Christmas, but they say Happy Holidays just so they don't worry about possibly pissing people off. Just like toy stores have, like, gender-neutral toy sections so people don't get possibly pissed off.
I can't imagine. I mean, regardless of how you feel about this law, support it, dislike it.
Well, before we get to that, what do you think about this law that California did?
A little unnecessary.
Yeah.
Considering all was already do that.
So if you had to vote on what would you vote for?
So I think it's unnecessary. I would probably vote for it.
I don't know if I'd probably vote for it because I don't think it's really necessary. Let the toy store decide for himself, for me.
Present.
Yeah. But in the end, regardless if it's passed or not, it's still not a big deal as Benny Boy makes it out to be.
Getting that worked up over this law. Is it really that necessary to be this outraged, Ben? I mean, to think that a gender-neutral toy section promotes chaos in society, I just feel like, I don't want to say that he's being disingenuous, but it seems insincere because it seems implausible that an adult would be this worked up about a law that's pretty anodyne, if you ask me. Again, if you agree with this or disagree with it, I feel like this type of law shouldn't evoke that level of emotions from someone. So it's strange. So he tells you,
I mean, you're talking about someone who's triggered by the wet ass P word, remember? Fucking snowflake.
Triggered by just about everything.
that
Dude's one of
the reason
snowflakes that ever snowflaked, so...
I mean, that's what all conservatives are.
why this law is bad is because
Pretty
what
much.
you're saying,
At least-
what you're really
at
saying
least ones who have lost their brains.
is gender doesn't exist. But that's
Because
not
there is actually the rare conservative, like Potola 54, who actually has kept his brain.
the law is saying. The law is acknowledging that there are gender binaries and some children just naturally don't fall within, the masculine or feminine categories. It's not an attempt to indoctrinate children. It's an attempt to allow kids to express themselves and feel as if they're not kind of boxed in when they select toys. I mean, look, as a kid, I mostly played with boys' toys. I had my Beast Wars, but from time to time, maybe, a Polly Pocket looked pretty dope, so I wanted to check that out. And as a child, I had all of these gender stereotypes ingrained, and I actually felt like shit because I wanted to play with a Polly Pocket. Which, I mean, I feel like playing with toys is supposed to bring happiness to children, so we shouldn't be setting up this culture where they feel bad if they dare to deviate from the norm. But according to Ben Shapiro, quote, what we're really saying is there's...
What were you saying?
That's all conservatives want to hold on to.
Of course, what do you expect?
There's no such thing as biological sex or human proclivities that are directed by biological sex or connected to it. Okay, I don't think that that's what people are saying in advocating for this law, Ben. I don't. I mean, it's not like there are a lot of kids who acknowledge that they are transgender or non-binary. I mean, they show signs at a very young age, but no kid who's like 2 or 3 is explicitly thinking, I'm trans. They're just being themselves. So if you were born male, perhaps you have, this desire to play with dolls. I mean, I have a nephew who likes Frozen. He's not talking about his gender. He's very young, but he likes Frozen, and that's fine. Like, I don't think that we should make him feel bad because he likes a toy and a product and a brand that's...
That reminds me, are you into like any hobbies like when you were a kid that were more like towards women?
When I was a teenager, I played with my younger cousin's dolls a fair bit.
And did you
But that's really about it.
And did you get teased or anything for it?
Nah, not really.
Oh boy, you were lucky because when I was in school, guess what? I was teased for being
What?
a Powerpuff Girl fanboy. Yep, it's cool. I remember when I was in first grade, I had these awesome like light up Powerpuff Girls tennis shoes. They were so cool. I was teased by everyone wearing them and stuff like that. How could you like Powerpuff Girls? Yeah, boy, and shit like that. Like, go fuck off. That show was awesome. Cry more.
It was.
Yes, it was. But, don't remind me of the 2016 remake. Please don't remind me of that cringe.
It's typically marketed towards young girls. I think that if you're a kid, you should just have fun because
Exactly.
you're only a kid once. And why, make kids feel bad. But moving on to the law and moving past Ben Shapiro's outrage, the law itself to me seems a little bit redundant if I'm being honest, because if you go to any big...
It pretty much is redundant. A lot of places already do have gender neutral, or people just don't really care by and large.
Big box retailer, they already kind of have sections that are gender neutral. I mean, certainly they have these sections that are very clearly tailored towards young boys and young girls, but then they have sections like the educational section. There's usually like puzzles. They have sections where there's not necessarily a specific gender that they're marketed towards already. So it seems like this law, I mean, the energy for this law perhaps could have been directed towards anti-bullying and more healthcare resources for trans kids.
Which, by the way, I forgot to post this earlier, but I found out on Twitter recently that California Democrats are trying to pass Medicare for all in California. Bang!
Oh, about fucking time.
Hopefully their party don't stop them like they did a few years ago, remember that?
Yeah.
We need to cover that for maybe the next episode, but that's why I'd rather your guys' energy be towards, not necessarily this law.
toilets. Something like that, but either way, let's get to the rationale behind the actual law that Ben Shapiro is angry about. Jonathan Edwards of the Washington Post explains, a 10-year-old girl was shopping with her mother one day when she asked the question, why were some toys off limits to her as a girl, but would be okay to play with if she were a boy? The girl was...
That is honestly a stupid thing to think of for a kid. Why are some toys off limits to her as a girl, but would be okay to play with if she were a boy? You're not limited to play those. If you want to play toys that are associated with boys, go ahead. Like, there's no law that says you can't. Like, what? That's really weird. That's pretty dumb.
The daughter of a staffer who worked for a California lawmaker. This year, Assemblyman Evan Lowe cited the girl's question as an inspiration for a bill he wrote that will force some retailers to create gender-neutral children's sections in their stores. California Governor Gavin Newsom on Saturday signed Lowe's legislation, Assembly Bill 1084, which will force large retailers to have non-gendered toy sections starting in 2024. Proponents said the requirement will help consumers comparison shop and also tamp down on gender stereotypes that hurt children who play with toys marketed to a different gender.
I don't think the toys cause gender stereotypes. I think it's whiny conservatives like Benny Boy that cause that shit.
Yeah.
Like, who really thinks kids are going to be hurt by forced gender stereotypes on toys? They're just toys, and they're just kids. They're not going to honestly understand this crap. Like, come on.
Detractors said the law infringes on business owners' freedom to market their products and lay out their stores as they see fit. The new law, introduced by Democratic lawmakers Lowe and Christina Garcia, won't prohibit stores from having traditional boys and girls sections, but will require them to have a reasonable selection of toys and items in a gender-neutral section, regardless of whether they have been traditionally marketed for either boys or girls. The requirement will apply to retailers with 500 or more employees in California. Those failing to meet it, starting on January 1st of 2024, will face a $250 fine for a first offense and $500 fine for any after that. So, I mean, this seems like their heart was in the right place. It's a step in the right direction. I think being more inclusive, that's a good thing. It's not as big of a deal as Ben Shapiro is making it out to be.
It's never a big deal.
The inspiration for this law, that 10-year-old girl who was shopping with her mother, I think that it's more important to teach children that it's okay if they want to deviate from the norm. And if you're a little boy, it's fine if you play with girl toys. If you're a girl, it's fine if you play with boys toys. I think that teaching them that is also really important, because there's no innate thing in us as children that makes us want to play with action figures and be drawn to the color blue if we're born with penises. That's just not the case. And the opposite is true for girls. So I think that kind of getting out of this is healthy for society. It will make for healthier children if they don't feel as if, they have to force themselves to play with a specific set of toys so that way they appease other people. I think that that's really harmful. I feel like, as a parent, Ben Shapiro should acknowledge this, but either way, he's outraged about this, and I feel like he's just trying to feed into the culture war, when in actuality this law is not really that big of a deal. Again, I feel like you can do other things that are probably more pressing to actually help trans children, which they should do. I mean, California probably already has a lot more resources, but one of the biggest issues facing trans people is lack of access to healthcare. We need a single-payer healthcare system
Which, hey, after this video came out, like I said, the California Democrats are trying to get that in California, so hopefully they succeed.
The United States. But we don't have that. So there's a lot of issues in the United States that are really, really worthy of Democratic Party lawmakers' time. So this seems like something that's like an easy win for them, but either way, it's not that big of a deal. They could do more, and they should do more to help trans children and trans youth. But either way, does this law warrant the outrage that it got from Ben Shapiro? No, but of course, it's anything that is affirming of trans and non-binary identity, so of course they're going to hate it just by default, because they don't like trans people. Contrary to what they'll say, their actions indicate that they think that they are less than cis people. And I say this because they support politicians who introduce legislation that discriminate against people who are not cisgender. So, either way, it's not a big deal. But of course, Ben Shapiro is going to melt down. And I think it's time that we acknowledge that the true snowflakes in the United States are right-wingers.
That's always been the case. And Benny, and I already know Benny Boy being like, oh yeah, well, feelings over facts, and my wife is a doctor. How about that, libtard? Fucking idiot. So yeah, we
Yeah.
gotta say about Benny Boy here being a fucking idiot.
Nature. There's just typical snowflake behavior from this idiot.
And you,
Because, well, it's him. What do you expect?
yep. And like I said, I don't even know if I would necessarily support the law here. I think it's kind of unnecessary. But Benny Boy, it's not that big of a deal to have a meltdown over. It's like, this is how you react to it. Whatever. That's how you react to it. Jesus Christ. Fucking dumbass. Alright. So I think we've done making fun of Benny Boy. Now, what do you want to talk about next?
Censorship and entertainment.
Ah, yes! Because we actually talked about this. Well, the one thing I wanted to talk about in particular was more like self-enforced censorship, if you get what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we talked about this, like, last year on, cancel culture and wokeness, but I didn't think I did a really good job talking about it. Like, the one things I really wanted to talk about was, like, the topics we talked about in that one. That was, remember the meltdown about Mr. Potato Head and the Dr. Seuss books?
Yeah.
So,
I remember that.
So, of course, in that one in particular, when it comes to Mr. Potato Head, guys, for all of you who don't know, it wasn't the characters that had their name changed. It was the brand that had their name changed. Mr. Potato Head's the character, but it was also the name of the brand. But remember, it's not just Mr. Potato Head. It's Mrs. Potato Head, too, if you remember from Toy Story. So there's a whole bunch of characters in that. So they renamed it to be more accurate. Although it was probably to be inclusive, too. But it was more to reflect the reality of the product being more than just one character. It's not that big of a deal in that regard. If anything, it should be positive because it's being more accurate. And then, like, do you remember the controversy about Dr. Seuss as well?
That one was just simply 6 really bad, 6 weird things, books that had a bit of a checkered history.
It was like a few books that they stopped selling, like completely out of print, because they were considered politically incorrect and all that. And when it comes to that, I honestly don't really agree with them doing that. I don't think they should stop selling them if people want to get them. If you're that offended by it, just have like a what's the word? I guess like a warning, like on the first page or something like that, about it doesn't reflect your current value, something like that.
It's in the book.
Yeah, but don't stop selling it if people want it. You can make money off of it. Just why? You know what also reminds me of?
What?
This Thomas, right?
Thomas.
The tank engine.
Yes.
You do know it was a book series, right?
I heard something about that.
Because that's how it started, was a book series before it became the model series in the 80s. There was one story, this one always bugged me immensely too. This is a big problem too on the Thomas Wiki, which is hard to believe because I don't think it's really an issue. But there was one story, if you might know if you watched, have you ever watched the series on TV with the models?
Yeah.
Maybe you noticed, do you know the episode where Henry was going underneath a bridge and some kids dropped rocks on his coaches? And he's
Not really.
Well, it was based upon a story in the book, the first 2 seasons of the show were. So what happened was, after they smashed his carriage's windows with rocks, they turned around, went back, and went underneath the bridge. And as they were going underneath the bridge, Henry sneezed and caused a massive cloud of soot to go up the bridge and actually gave them the kids a black face and such like that, if you remember that. But that's not even the controversial thing, that they had blackface. You know what the actual controversial thing was?
What?
In the book, the original one, until it was edited in 1972, it said that the kids, their faces were as black as niggers.
Oh.
And people and people had a meltdown over it, and it got changed to 1970 in the 70s to become coal. Ain't that kind of funny?
Funny in a freaky way.
What?
Funny in a freaky way.
That was pretty funny. But I don't know about you, but I don't like that either. I don't like when they censor stuff like that. Like, get over it. It's in a book. Now people be like, it's for kids though. So, just get over it. It's not that big of a deal. And it's kind of funny too. Like, you bust out laughing too. And the funny thing is, yeah, and the funny thing is, they have a meltdown even mention it on the wiki if they should be allowed to say that or not. The mention that got censored. It's still an issue every time I go to the Thomas wiki about it. It's like really stupid. Like they have a debate nonstop of should they even just mention that it got censored because it's a slur. We can't say that on here. Like, get over it and stuff like that. And then, and this is another topic that just got me off the top of my head. Not necessarily entertainment. It's kind of like a toy. You've probably never heard of this, but there's a monster truck called Saigon Shaker. And I found out they made a die-cast for it recently. And guess what they did?
What?
It was renamed Shaker instead of Saigon Shaker. You know why it got renamed on the toy?
Something related to Saigon.
Yep, because the toys are manufactured in Vietnam, and apparently it's too offensive to have that name on there, so they have to censor it everywhere else. Like, get the fuck over it, you fucking whiny Karens. So what if it has the name Saigon in it? It's the name of the truck. Boo-hoo. Cry more, get over it. I'm fucking tired of shit. And then, of course, with, like, censorship, oh my god. Well, you already know about this, like, with GTA 5, like, down there in Australia, where it got banned for a while, remember? Because it's violent, it's misogynistic against women, all that. Remember that? That bullshit crap. You there?
Yes, I remember that.
So, what do you guys say about this? When are people going to learn to stop being such triggered about entertainment and just let it be how it is? It just reminds me too of like 4Kids when they brought anime to America. Remember? Oh my god, Pokemon. Oh, Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially. Oh my god, that was terrible.
Oh, that's a surprise.
That was fucking awful when they did that. Are you scared by my invisible guns?
Yes. Or they made the discs into glowing discs.
Yep.
And instead of don't touch it, send your mind to the shadow realm. Even though the original would have your legs cut off.
Or when Yugi and Kaiba bowed those
Lunas and Umbra.
Yeah.
On the top of the skyscraper.
And they're gonna fall to their death. And then all like the fights, like they censored so much stuff on that was just so funny for crying out loud. But that's another reason why you can't
they did that to. Oh god, that's nothing compared to what they did with GX and 5Ds.
I know they censored a lot of 5Ds, and of course I know they didn't dub season 4.
Yeah, that was the big one. No season 4 with GX. The entire final arc of 5Ds will never be dubbed.
And that was
so much they censored mainly around Alexis and Akiza.
Of course, you know how triggered they are over here and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So haven't you also seen this in like an entertainment too?
We did something from 5Ds. They censored the end of one of the duels in the Crash Town arc, the last one.
I haven't gotten to 5D, so I don't know about that. But I know like they censored a whole bunch because it was like more violent than like Duel Monsters.
Oh yeah, 5Ds definitely was. I actually think 5Ds. If it wasn't for the fact that GX had an entire season censored, I'd say that it wasn't dubbed. I'd say 5Ds is the most censored of the series.
Even more than Duel Monsters?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another thing too. Since Yu-Gi-Oh, although
speaking of Yu-Gi-Oh, any romance plots basically removed from the dub, if you remember. A hell of a lot of moments for all the main pairings.
For what?
Mostly involving Yugi. Despite the fact the second half of the series, I'm pretty sure he's 18.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. They censored a lot at like what was it, season 4, where they did got rid of a whole bunch of shipping moments. Even though they were funny as hell. Even though it was funny as hell seeing Taya get so jealous and triggered throughout it.
Yeah.
Like, and that's another thing too. Yu-Gi-Oh is actually no. I think Yu-Gi-Oh was made for more like teens over in Japan, but then when they tried to make it kid over here instead.
Jeez, okay. So not even for teens. The very original, at Dark Yugi, is he's basically a fancy serial killer.
Yeah, that's how it was in the original.
Manga.
Yep, that's how it was in season 0 in the original part of the manga. Which I need to get back
Now,
to reading again.
no, season 0 is censored compared to the very original manga of Yu-Gi-Oh!
And that's
Holy shit!
at least I actually watched season 0 like 2 times over the years.
I haven't seen all of season 0, but I've seen quite a bit.
I might be able to find you the links later on if you want to see them. But that was really good watching that. But yeah, have you also noticed this in other like forms of entertainment you like when it gets censored, and also like self-censorship for like stupid reasons?
Yes. Oh god. I think the one that might have strongly contributed to 4Kids' demise was what they did to Sonic X.
What was the censorship in that?
Oh, they basically took out at least two, basically two entire relationship subplots, between Tails and Cosmo. That went to a full confession in the, original. And though they didn't take it to full confession, we got pretty close to hooking up Sonic and Amy, which was like, okay. That was unexpected.
Sonic being with Amy? That would be very surprising to see.
I'd say it would come down to I reckon it comes down to how Amy matures as she gets older. That would be the key. Like if she's...
But she's a brat though, remember?
She's 12! She's not even a teenager. I often throw, if I were to do sort of things, I'd often throw both of them several years up. And kind of have a duality with Amy, where basically it's like, fight first, fangirl later. You know, she knows when she's got to keep a lid on it, and when she can actually let it all out.
Yeah. Boy, I'm sure the Sonic community will be triggered about that, since you know there's so much yaoi on that one, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Thing
I've noticed is that
Sonic and Shadow a lot.
Mostly just original Yu-Gi-Oh! Like GX isn't touched at all. Isn't really touched that much. 5Ds has a bit of it, but it's like usually you say with the Kiza, Jackson, Carly, Crow or Cal. I think Crow's usually with Sherry LeBlanc or maybe Callan. Yes. Not so much guy on guy. It's more girl on girl usually between Alexis and Perry. I've noticed more girl on girl than guy on guy.
Oh my God! Let's see. Classic for Yu-Gi-Oh. Yugi and Joey, Yugi and Kaiba, American Bakura. That is so. I don't know why is there so much yaoi in the original Duel Monsters of Yu-Gi-Oh? It's always so funny.
Well, considering that, here's the interesting thing. Interestingly, there's a lot of LGBT representation in the original two series of Yu-Gi-Oh! No. So Pegasus, pretty explicitly gay. Yep. Yugi Moto is implied to be bi. There's probably a couple. I think Marek and Bakura, I think Bakura is at least implied to be at least bi. Jesse Anderson from GX is pretty explicitly gay. Jaden is pretty heavily pan.
Oh no!
Not just bi, but pansexual.
Oh no!
I think Alexis is implied to be bi as well. And I think there's a couple others that are like that as well.
You just triggered all those social con Karens out there back in the 2000s hearing that.
I don't know. was, but it probably was. But I've got to say, most of the resurgence in Yowie and the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Is thanks to Dark Side of Dimensions.
Yeah. So yeah, like you guys need to stop supporting like censorship and entertainment, just especially self-censorship too. Just stop. Just stop. Cry more if you don't like it. I'm getting tired of it and all that crap. Just let people enjoy what there are. Just like get triggered by you and me's Pokemon fan fictions too that we work on.
Yeah.
I need to get back to work on them eventually. Alright, so I think we've talked enough about this, so now what do you want to talk about?
2022 Winter Olympic boycott.
Okay, so for all of you who don't know, coming up in the next month is going to be the Winter Olympics. This happens once every 4 years. There's like the Summer Olympics and, of course, the World Cup, which I believe is also this year as well. So this year's Winter Olympics is in Beijing, which is in China. It's the first time they think they've hosted the Winter Olympics. They hosted Summer Olympics back in 2008. And, of course, a lot of countries in the world are thinking about boycotting it. Now, of course...
Dramatically.
Yeah, well, I was about to say it. Because... What they mean by boycott are a couple different things. A full boycott would be like completely preventing like countries' athletes from going there, but a lot of them are just doing like diplomatic boycotts where like officials are not going to be going there, but like the athletes are still able to go and such like that. And of course, there's people saying that the West needs to do this to boycott the Olympics. Now, of course, this has happened before. If you didn't know it, in fact, the Olympics.
I know. The Soviet Union and the West did much mutual boycotts full boycotts. So they kept their athletes out as well.
Well, I was about to say it. This happened
in 2 consecutive Olympics.
Yes, this actually happened 3 straight times. If you didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
So the first time it happened was in 1976 in Montreal. For a whole bunch of African countries, some reason boycott. I don't remember exactly what that was about. Then, of course, there was the one in 1980 where the Soviet Union hosted, and of course, the majority of Western countries boycotted that because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And then, of course, right afterwards, in 1984, it was in Los Angeles where the Soviet world boycotted America in the Olympics as a payback for doing it in 1980. So it has happened before, but what would be the point of it is the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, what would be the point of it? Because, like, are you trying to stop the Olympics from happening whatsoever? I don't think that's going to happen. Is it to try and voice concerns about China's horrible human rights? Yeah, but just like with the 2008 Olympics, I don't think it's going to really do much. Like, what do you even support this for one? Or do you think it's even worth it?
And it's basically just a virtue signal.
Yeah.
It's basically what it is.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I don't even think it's really a point to boycott, because like it's not going to stop anything. China's still going to host the Olympics, and they're still going to do the human rights. It really just means nothing. The only thing you're doing is, if anything, you might help China gain some prestige, because that's what happened in both times when the Soviet Union and America boycotted the Olympics. Each side won like a shit ton of medals because of it, and they like gloated about it. So that might help.
Yep.
Although it really shouldn't, because who gives a fuck about sports when it comes to like geopolitics? But hey, that prestige thing works to some extent. So you might actually help China in that regard to outright boycott. Although, like we said, they're not doing like an outright full boycott. It would be more like a diplomatic one. But yeah, there's really like no point of it whatsoever. It's not going to do anything. In fact, let's go read that article, which I meant to do as we were talking about it. Where is it at? The debate over the 2022 Beijing Olympics from the Council of Foreign Relationships. For months, human rights groups and some politicians in Western nations have urged countries to boycott the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing over the Chinese government's rights abuses. The United States became the first major power to impose a diplomatic boycott, announcing 2 months before the games that it will not send any officials to Beijing. Other countries, including some in the EU, could follow suit. Why boycott the Beijing Olympics? China is invading in... What?
What?
Did you say something?
No, I didn't.
Why boycott the Beijing Olympics? China is facing intense criticisms for its human rights record. Several countries, including America, have accused China of committing genocide against the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities, which they are. Allegations that China denies. Rights groups have also called it... What?
Of course they deny it.
They have also called attention to Beijing's repressions of Tibet and its crackdown on freedoms in Hong Kong, which the Tibet one was a big thing too in 2008 for the Summer Olympics. That was a huge thing for that one. The disappearance of Chinese tennis star from public view in November adds to concerns. A coalition of nearly 200 rights groups argued that participation in the Beijing Olympics would be turning a blind eye to those abuses that could be seen as an endorsement of the Chinese Communist Party's authoritarian rule. Not really. The International Olympic Committee, which organizes and oversees the Games, have sought to avoid the controversy, reaffirming that it maintains a neutral position on political issues. What could boycotts look like? In a full boycott, a government refuses to send athletes, officials, and spectators to the host nation. Biden administration has instead imposed a diplomatic boycott, citing the government's ongoing genocides and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other abuses. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said athletes are still allowed to compete, but Biden and other government officials will not attend. Other alternatives to a full boycott include relocation, which is, I'm sure a lot of people have tried to do, relocate the Olympics completely.
Yeah.
Some lawmakers in the U.S., U.K., and several EU countries have called for the 2002 Winter Olympics to be moved to another country if China does not stop oppressing Uyghurs. Experts say the IOC is unlikely to consider the relocation, which would probably require a postponement at this late date. Yeah, that would require a postponement, because who's going to host the Olympics? Because for all of you don't know, the Olympics are scheduled like 7 years in advance. So it's not like just somebody could just change overnight. Like, God, remember the Olympics early last year for Japan that got delayed for a year because of COVID? That was a big issue, just to delay for a year, remember?
Yeah.
And they were planning that for like 8 years or so. So that's not really feasible. Plus, China would probably prevent that from happening. Athlete protests. Athletes can themselves boycott the games or use use social media to spotlight to make political statements. Although this is prohibited by the IOC, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic committees have said it will not sanction American athletes for protests. Still, some experts warn athletes that do that could face repercussions. I don't think it's going to really matter much, though. Actions by sponsors. Activists are also pressuring corporate sponsorships such as Airbnb and Coca-Cola to withdraw their support, although none have done so yet. When the Financial Times asked the 13 companies that have major sponsorship contracts with the IOCs about their plans, 11 refused to comment. Like, corporations don't care. They don't care about human rights abuses. All they care about is money. I guarantee, like I've said this before, I guarantee you if they could make 1 cent by being every ist in the book, they're going to do that, become every ist in the book to make that 1 extra cent. Because all corporations care about is money. The only time they don't is when you force them. But I doubt anything's going to do to make them do that. What motivated past boycotts? Hey, we'll get to the Canada one. Full boycotts have happened a handful of times over a variety of reasons. Notable examples include the 1976 games, when more than 24 African nations boycotted the Montreal Olympics after the IOC refused to ban New Zealand, whose rugby team had ignored an international sporting embargo to tour apartheid South Africa. 4 years later, America led the boycott to the Moscow Olympics to protest the Soviet Union invasion of Afghanistan. We already talked about that. The Soviet Union retaliated in 1984, boycotting the Los Angeles Olympics. The last full boycott was in 1988 when North Korea and its allies skipped the 1988 Olympics when South Korea hosted it. Do boycotts work? Now here's the most important thing. Experts say it is difficult to measure a boycott's success. Boycotts have impacts in a variety of ways that are almost always indirect, almost always over a relatively extended period of times, and sometimes counterproductive, says David Black, a professor at whatever university this is, who studies sports and international diplomacy. For example, Black says the Soviet Union didn't leave Afghanistan because of the 1980 boycott, but the boycott eroded the prestige it hoped to gain from the games and signaled growing disapproval of Moscow's actions. In the case of the 2022 Beijing Olympics, many experts say that a boycott likely won't work and could make it even harder to gain concessions from China. Some say that concerned governments and media outlets could instead use the 2022 games to draw attention to China's abuses. I mean, that's true. You can use the Olympics for that regard to point out how authoritarian are.
They probably should be doing.
Yeah, I don't think China would give two shits whatsoever if they actually boycott the Olympics. Like, whoop-de-doo. If anything, they might like it because they might win more medals. I don't think it's really going to change.
Yeah.
I don't think a boycott is going to change anything about their actions. Would China retaliate? China's foreign ministry has warned of a robust response to any boycotts, including taking unspecified countermeasures against America over its diplomatic boycott. Experts point out that China has many ways it could retaliate. The Chinese government could suspend bilateral exchange and participations in global talks, such as those on climate change. Oh, boo-hoo! Disrupt trade and sanction foreign officials. That would hurt them just as much, too, so that would be kind of silly. Indeed, there are countless examples in recent years of Beijing retaliating against foreign actions it disapproved of. China could also leverage its vast consumer market of 1.4 billion people to damage companies that withdraw support for the games. For example, earlier this year, brands including H&M and Nike faced boycotts by some of the Chinese public after the companies say they will stop using cotton from Xinjiang. If Beijing perceives that it has lost face, they could react pretty strongly. Yeah, that's it of it. I think the only thing China would probably realistically do without hurting themselves would probably boycott America's Summer Olympics when Los Angeles hosts in 2028, I think. That's probably the only thing they really would do. But by that...
For boycott, they're going to do diplomatic boycott, just like the rest of them did.
Like, I don't think they're going to probably do anything of, like, the sort about, like, not doing solutions for, like, climate change, disrupt trade and all that, because that's going to hurt them just as much, so that would be kind of weird that would be kind of, like, that would be, like, really out of line for something as trivial as that, you won't send officials to our Olympics. Oh, boo-hoo. But, yeah, this is pretty much like a worthless thing to worry about. There's no real benefit to boycott the Olympics.
Yeah.
Alright, so, talked enough about that. So, what do you want to talk about next?
Next is going to be, what good things has Joe Biden done? And this is going to trigger the doorknob since with Biden, they're like, you can only criticize Biden and the Democrats. You can never give them credit for anything. If they do something good, attack them with something else.
Like Harry. So anyways, Biden's now been president for almost a year now. So, although we hate him on here, and we hope he does not run in 2024, he gets replaced by a progressive, we still have to acknowledge, just like when we acknowledged the last 2 years almost of doing this show, when Trump did something good, we have to also acknowledge when Biden has done some good things. Now, I'm trying to think as best I could of everything off the top of my head, because I did not really list them all. So I'm going to try and go for all the good things he's done in his year. Like, the first two things I can think off the three things I think off the top of my head was his executive orders the first day he got in. One, got back into Paris Climate Agreement, even though I don't really think it's going to do any sort of help whatsoever. 2, ended the trans military ban. That's good. And 3, got rid of that stupid 1776 project, remember? Oh my god. So those are a couple things. Another one was raising the minimum wage for federal employees. That's really good. Being much better in terms of responding to COVID on like the fucking orangutan dipshit. Although unfortunately, I blame this, like the stuff that's going on with COVID right now, more on like idiot anti-vaxxers that refuse to get vaccinated more than him. Because Biden's really doing everything he could. Sometimes to the point where I'm not even fully sure if I would like agree with him in that regard. But he's at least trying in that regard. This one is definitely going to trigger Voshites, but he's kept the tariffs on China that Trump put on, if you didn't know that.
Yep.
Hey, that's something I'll give Biden 100% praise for. And unlike Vosh, I will at least give Biden credit for that one as he gets triggered by that. So, stay mad, Voshites.
I love that within like a minute we triggered doorknobs and Voshites.
Yep. Of course, he did a really good speech recently about Trump, the insurrection. Remember, if you didn't see that, that was a very good speech. destroying Trump once again. You lost, pretty much, he said. Which, you did. So, cry more. Oh, we gotta get to the video eventually of mocking the idiots that still denied Trump was involved in the insurrection, as Mike and Kyle covered recently. What other things that he did recently?
Afghanistan.
What?
Holdout of Afghanistan.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that in a little bit, but I'm trying to think of other things. But yeah, that is Oh, I know something else too. Although he lied about it and it didn't happen, still doing out those COVID stimulus bills. That one he did was good. Although he still needs to be criticized because you guys lied about it. It was supposed to be $2,000 on its own, and you only did $1,400. But despite that, it's still a good thing regardless. And of course,
better than what Trump did.
Yeah, and then pulling out of Afghanistan. That one, I think, is the main reason why Biden is being hated to oblivion right now, because that's when his poll numbers started to tank and they just never recovered because the mainstream media fucking lied and smeared him for it. But guys, that was the right thing he did.
World War III.
That was the right thing to finally get out of Afghanistan. We've been there for almost 20 years. Nothing was going to happen. And guess what? I know it's going to trigger you, but the Taliban would have still taken over anyway. So we just need to get out. Now, unfortunately, as I think Mike covered, he's been sanctioned the hell out of the Taliban government after that. Now Afghanistan's starving. So, yeah. If anything, you might be helping the Taliban more for doing that, Biden. Just saying. Maybe you should remove some of those sanctions on food and help the Afghanis. Just saying.
On water, so that people don't die of thirst.
Yeah. He also, although this is probably, has a lot of caveats to it too. Actually, two things. He's actually done some pulling out of Iraq, if you didn't know about that.
He pulled some troops out of Iraq.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I highly doubt this is true, but he once again said, just like Obama did in 2011, that the occupation of Iraq is over. Remember that? But
it's not.
Well, it was for a moment, but then we had to go back in because of ISIS.
Yeah.
So he said this. I don't believe it. I'm sure if I look into it, there's probably some troops there, stuff like that. So, but hopefully, he starts pulling out of Iraq too. And then there was another.
He's got to pull. He's still going to pull out of Syria and Somalia and them, but
yeah, and there was
he's pulling some places out.
There was another place too that I was thinking of too, but got interrupted. What was it? Maybe you got some ideas of things that he did that were good.
Not really.
I think there was like a few more, but they won't come to my damn fucking head. But yeah, here's the thing, guys. Like we said, we hate Biden. I'm sure a lot of you watch it too probably don't like him either. But regardless if you don't like or don't like a person, you have to give them credit for when they do something. Oh, I know what he did recently. He extended the student loan payments, remember?
Okay.
For a few more months. So that's a good thing, although he needs to, fucking get rid of them completely, which he has the ability to do so. He tried to do the extension for the moratorium on evictions, remember, but of course the Supreme Court struck that down. That's like, Harry, I know you deny that, but that was still a good thing that he did that. That provided help for like a month or so for people to stay in their homes. Like, that's still a good thing, even though we know he could do more, regardless of the Supreme Court stopping him and stuff like that.
Remember, he's the doorknob, so we're not allowed to give Biden credit on anything.
Yeah. But yeah, like we were trying to say too, when someone does something right, you have to praise them. Just like on this show, we gave Trump credit for doing the right thing sometimes. In fact, we're actually going to praise him a little bit in an upcoming part too, so be on the lookout for that. You can't be a partisan hack. If someone you like does something bad,
or
you have to...
someone who just hates everyone, because only hates the Democrats, and is like, yeah, we're never going to talk about the Republicans. They're terrible. Let's focus on how the demon rats are plotting to blow up the planet.
When someone you like does something bad, you need to call it out, just like we've done, like Bernie, the Squad, and all them who we like on the show, but we've criticized them when they do something wrong.
Also, for example, said that Ron Carter and Jonah PayPal need to be primary.
Yeah. Likewise, we gave Trump and Biden credit for things they did right, even though we hate them immensely. You gotta be objective in this regard. And likewise, if Biden does something terrible, we're gonna criticize him on this show. And if he does something good again in the future, we're gonna praise him. Just like we're gonna be praising Trump in a moment for something, with some caveats too. So yeah, these are undeniably good things that Biden has done in his first year. You can't refute that, unless you're some dumb, fucking retarded conservative.
Yeah.
All right. So now, what's the next topic you want to talk about?
Next on the list is unrest in Kazakhstan. What the fuck is going on there?
So, for all of you who don't know, Kazakhstan is a country in Central Asia. It used to be part of the Soviet Union.
Well, the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And actually has a relationship with Russia to use the rocket base there.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's a former country that used to be part of the Soviet Union. It's in Central Asia. It, this year, has had a massive unrest throughout the capital, to like riots and all that. Like, it is absolutely insane, to the point where I think it was called the CSTO, which is kind of like Russia's equivalent to like NATO and EU after the Soviet Union collapsed. They've actually sent peacekeepers into Kazakhstan to help quell the rioters. Since that's a little bit complicated, probably when we get to read about it, and America's like having a meltdown over it. Like, chill out. We don't. What?
Of course.
Yeah. So, anyways, we're gonna read about because. So I posted the NPR article if you want to read it too. So here we go about Kazakhstan's problems. The new year has gotten off to a very bad start for Kazakhstan. On January 1st, the government lifted a price cap on fuel, setting off a sudden and steep increase in the cost of liquefied petroleum gas, which most people in the Central Asian nation use to run their vehicles. That move sparked widespread protests that turned violent as security forces cracked down. This sounds a lot like the Indian protests we covered sometime recently, when the prices rose. No, it was actually to cut the price of their agriculture, whereas this one raises the cost for living pretty much. Because a lot of countries, for all of you don't know, a lot of countries subsidize like fossil fuels, like petroleum, gas, and all that crap. So, like your cars, paying me for gas, depending on the country, it actually would be cheaper otherwise if it wasn't for these regulations. In the days since a presidential resident and the mayor's office, and I don't know what the name of the capital is, have been burned, the country's main airport has been stormed as angry Kazakhs clash with police. There have been reports of looting. However, information is sketchy as authorities have restricted access to the internet, because Kazakhstan is a very authoritarian country, for all of you who don't know. Just like they're like the equivalent to Belarus in Central Asia. And
all of the Soviet stans are like the problem.
Well, not almost all of them. However, information is sketchy. I already read this part. To the internet and social media as an apparent effort to thwart citizens' power to organize. Very authoritarian of you, of course. The country's interior minister on Friday acknowledged that some 3,800 people have been detained. A police spokesperson said on state TV that dozens of attackers were liquidated. Perhaps most ominously, President, I'm not going to bother to pronounce your name, who earlier this week invited in a Russian-led force as backup. That's what the CTSO, whatever I was talking about, authorized by Kazakhstan security forces to shoot and kill anyone he describes as bandits and terrorists. Here are 3 things that you need to know about the current situation in Kazakhstan. Is this really about fuel prices? Yes and no. The roots of unrest in Kazakhstan, which won independence 3 decades ago as the Soviet Union evaporated, run deep, said Deputy Director of Atlantic Council's Eurasian Center. The story is not about the price of gas. The story is about power. It's about inequality. It's about a lack of political choices. The issue of fuel prices illustrated inequality part of that equation, says Jennifer Brock, whatever, the Director of Center of Governments and Markets at the University of Pittsburgh. The fuel price spike happened in western Kazakhstan, and that's part of the country that produces its vast gas reserves. They said the price increases is seen as an insult to oil workers who have contributed so much to Kazakhstan's prosperity, with much of that wealth monopolized by the elites and government. So it's an oligarchy like Russia, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The unrest also happens to follow December's 10th anniversary of the government's deadly quash of striking oil workers in the town of whatever, where the most recent spat of protests began this month. That was very fresh in people's minds when that price spike hit, she said. Whatever your name is, has been saddled, most likely the president, has been saddled with the legacy of his powerful predecessor. Yeah, Kazakhstan had like a president for like 20 plus years who's no longer in power. Rose through the political ranks in the Soviet era. Kazakhstan then went on to rule the country from its independence till 2019. So yeah, the former president of Kazakhstan was the leader pretty much from the end of the Soviet Union all the way up to 2019. So like 30 years in power. He stepped down with one condition, he said. He wanted to protect his stolen assets, and he wanted his family to be protected as well. But there was a problem, she said. The elites in Kazakhstan didn't figure out a good way to divvy up power among themselves, leaving the current president in a very weak position. Initially, the current president pledged greater political freedoms and to reform the economy, but progress has been slow to materialize, exacerbated by COVID as well as the tendency of the old elite, of course. And despite the previous president's obstationable departure after decades of rule, he remains as head of the country's Security Council. So I'm sure pretty much still in continuing to operate from behind the curtain. There we go. It's actually a continuation of the same government. Kind of like how when Putin was no longer president of Russia after 2008, he became prime minister until he became president again in 2008. He was still in power.
And then when about 2017, he basically declared himself fascist dictator of Russia.
Just like Erdogan did in Turkey, too, the same thing.
Yep. So they did in the Neo-Ottoman Empire.
So the former president's power elite still have been controlling Kazakhstan. Courtney tells NPR's Morning Edition, current president, he says, does not have an independent power base. A senior fellow of... What were we saying?
I didn't say anything there.
A senior fellow in the Russian and Eurasian program at the, whatever this is, of Endowment of International Peace agrees. Former president stepped down, but he moved to behind-the-scenes positions. Ordinary Kazakhs still see former president, whose family accumulated considerable wealth while he was in power, as calling all the shots. Well, no shit. Some of the protesters in recent days have picked up the chant, "Old man out," referring to former president. The current crisis, however, may be serving as a catalyst for change. Earlier this week, current president dismissed the cabinet and the prime minister and forced the former president off the Security Council. Wow, that's pretty bold. Like, clean up everyone. Interesting. That's pretty bold. There are reports that the longtime ruler and his immediate family have since left the country for the UAE. Former president's ouster allowed current president to assume full control of the military and security councils. Who knows how that would turn out, though. He also agreed to temporarily restore the fuel price caps to assuage public anger, although it appears to be the protesters won't be that easily mollified. Hey, if you're able to keep the pressure on, keep going for those political and economic reforms you were promised for the last few years. Why not? The best way to describe what we're seeing is a coup by the current president against the former president. Although he shouldn't be in power in the first place, but okay. Current president didn't have the guns. He didn't have the backing of the security services or the military, which he honestly should have if he's the current president. Just saying. Now that he has the guns, the question of the backing is another matter. It's not clear how much control current president has, someone told NPR. It's likely that he'll turn to the CSTO, which I just said, the Russian-led Eurasian military alliance akin to NATO, comprising Armenia... Yeah.
Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, okay.
There is evidence that current president didn't trust his own security services.
Yes.
How concerned is Russia's intervention. Russia and Kazakhstan share a 4,700-mile border. That certainly is a concern to the Russians, and the fact that Kazakhstan is a key security ally. I'll get to that later. This one says not...
That's what I was talking about. launching crewed space missions. It's the only thing they have.
Yeah. But inviting the CSTO to the country is a gamble for current president because nationalistic fervor has run high in Kazakhstan. He takes a legitimacy hit for calling on the Russians for assistance. But he says what began as a protest for grandmothers, families, and younger people and older people all coming out has been hijacked by thugs in recent days. The precarious security situation is making ordinary Kazakhs nervous. If they can restore order, if the Russians can stay behind the scenes and are not seen as participating in the violence, the hit to current president's reputation will likely be limited, he says. Whoever's talking about this. The University of Pittsburgh's whatever says that the Kremlin is very much focused elsewhere. Like with Ukraine, remember, which, by the way, we need to talk about that upcoming episode too. Because some things happened with that recently. Where Russia troops have massed on the borders and the U.S. and Western allies have raised concerns about invasion of Ukraine. Moscow views the unrest in itself as an unwelcome distraction. Ambassador Courtney adds that Russia will worry not to put its troops in harm's way. That would be unpopular back in Russia for Russian soldiers to die, and would be very unpopular for Kazakhstanis to be killed by Russian soldiers, he said. It's the... Come on, line up correctly. It's the CSTO's first real engagement, writes whoever this is at the Moscow Center. He says the Kremlin is sensitive to popular sentiment in Kazakhstan and has been careful from the onset to limit the mandate of the force to secure strategic installations and other important assets, leaving the task of dealing with protesters to Kazakhstan's police and army. Meanwhile, China, which also shares a border with Kazakhstan, is no stranger itself to heavy-handed tactics to quell dissent. Praised current president for his forceful tactics on Friday. Xi Jinping, in a message to current president, called the government response highly responsible, according to officials, whatever this is, agency. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke on Friday, and the Biden administration is very concerned about the situation in Kazakhstan. In a full conversation with the country's foreign minister, Blinken said that he reiterated our full support to Kazakhstan's constitutional institutions, as well as the absolute importance of respecting human rights, media freedom, including the restoration of internet service, and to deal with the peaceful protests in a way that would protect the protesters, upheld their rights, and consist of the rule of law. What happens next? Current president, who has declared a state of emergency, addressed the nation Friday on television saying he's given the order for the police and army to shoot and kill without warning. Not good. Even as he suggested that the situation is coming under control. Those who don't surrender will be eliminated, he warned. Okay, this is someone talking about this situation. Thinks the situation could play out in a few ways. One is that the CSTO and the Kazakh government get their act together and they use heavy coercive forces, which will put things down, I think, pretty quickly. On the other hand, people perceive weakness in the system right now. It's not clear what they are going to be doing, she said. If current president does not have a trust in his security forces, he's going to have enormous problems. My bet is that this is going to turn into a protracted conflict unless the government is willing to make concessions to people. A successful crackdown, however, could buy the president some time, they said, but if the Russians are seen as having more of a permanent presence, or if the Russians get involved in putting down any of the violence, it's really going to spark some discontent. Man, that was a lot of talking about right there. So what do you guys say about this?
It's a very precarious situation there. Hopefully they can sort it out quickly.
Yeah, this is like a conflicting. This is like pretty like nuanced, conflicting thing with going on in Kazakhstan. Hopefully, it can resolve correctly. Because you know what's really funny about Kazakhstan? If you don't know about
what,
it's actually kind of like in a freeway triangle like relationship with America, Russia, and China. If you don't know that.
Oh, I knew it was with Russia because of the space stuff. And I knew that, and I was pretty sure it had something with America because America's fucking everywhere, literally.
Well,
but I knew it had one with China too.
Well, here's why. One, for Russia, it's part of the CSTO. China, it's part of China's version of the CSTO, so it's in both like alliance and economic networks. And America's involved because America actually is allied with Kazakhstan, actually has bases in there from Afghanistan.
Oh right, yeah.
So Kazakhstan's like in a really weird like triangle between all three of them, and they're worried about like in the future this could maybe be like a diplomatic standoff between like Russia and China over control of Central Asia, because Russia views that as Russia views Central Asia as like their control. Like they view like all the former countries that were part of the Soviet Union as they're under their sphere of influence. That's why they're having a meltdown about Ukraine trying to join like NATO, for example. Likewise, they don't want China to get involved in Central Asia, which China is trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we talked about before that maybe the alliance between Russia and China is not so concrete as everyone thinks it is.
Yeah.
Especially with the weird, interesting thing with America being involved too with military bases there. So it's a very complex thing. Just hopefully it can be resolved peacefully, and hopefully Kazakhstan can get the economic and political freedoms that they were promised, and they deserve everywhere. Alright, so I think we've talked enough about that, so now what do you want to talk about?
Yes, my part. Josh Bernstein getting COVID-19 and Josh Duggar getting convicted of child pornography.
Alright, so of course, we talked about him in a previous episode. Joshua Fernstein is a dumbass conspiracy theorist and a hardcore religious fundamentalist who's a fucking whiny baby. Like, for all of you don't remember when we talked about earlier making fun of Benny Boy, making a big deal about the gender neutral toy sections? Fernstein literally has a meltdown every single time when Starbucks gives out their Christmas cups for Christmas because it doesn't have Christmas theme on it.
I remember that.
He literally has a meltdown each year because Starbucks refuses to have Christmas themes on their winter mugs around the holidays. He literally makes a big deal because Starbucks chooses not to get involved with it. Kind of like the War on Christmas crap and other stupid stuff like that. And what was the other one? Josh Duggar. That name sounds very familiar, but I don't know off the top of my head.
He's the other Duggar guy's department. His dad, Josh Duggar's dad's running for office. So
that name sounds very familiar. I think didn't he have like a dozen kids or something like that? And of course like a religious fundamentalist and other stupid crap like that.
Yep.
All right, so since you brought this up last time, give us the update on Joshua Fernstein getting COVID-19 since you talked about it.
Okay, so Josh Fernstein, he has been spreading all sorts of COVID lies for it. So he doesn't have to. He said, "You don't have to wear the mask. You got Jesus. You don't need the vaccine. You got Jesus." He's also bragged about being unvaccinated. Called church groups cowards for requiring negative COVID tests for entry to conferences, offered to sign religious exemption forms for anyone attending his events, and guess what? He got COVID about a month ago.
Yeah, we talked about that and what's happened to him since.
So we know that he has been using the bullshit treatments, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
Of course.
And since we know that, and since he actually cancelled one of his preaching things, it must be hitting him quite hard.
But you said he lived?
Can't tell. Haven't seen anything in a month. But, when was this?
But of course, I wouldn't be
He posted, I think he posted something December 16. And if that's the case, then he has since recovered.
And of course, him recovering, I'm sure it's not going to change his mind, but of course, I'm sure he's not going to get vaccinated. Because you're a fucking idiot that takes stuff that doesn't work, whereas the vaccine does work. But of course, what's your conspiracy theory this time? Is it a Chinese hoax, or is it something that it's ungodly or something like that? What's your excuse this time?
It's either a Chinese bioweapon or a pandemic.
Or it's just, or maybe it's just the devil's work.
Yes, the devil attacking me.
God, what an idiot. So yeah, Fernstein, if you're alive, I know you're not going to be watching this because you're triggered by libtards, but for crying out loud, get vaccinated because who knows, next time you might not be as lucky to survive if you did. Like, Jesus Christ. And now what about idiot Josh Duggar?
Ah, yes. And now we go on to Josh Duggar. Oh, let me just get this up.
What disgusting crap did he...
Activist on the Family Research Council staffer Joshua Duggar has been guilty of downloading and possessing illicit images of child sexual abuse. He was arrested earlier this year and now is guilty to verdict. He faces decades in prison.
Good riddance. Why am I not surprised? Religious fundamentalists once again being caught with child porn.
Yep.
This happens way too frequently, just like they're caught doing gay sex acts all the time, remember? What?
He's the one with 18 siblings.
There we go.
Jim Duggar. He's from 18 Kids and Counting, remember?
Yeah, that's where I was thinking about, like, the 12 kids earlier. Because I remember Kyle covering that.
19 kids. Jim Duggar has now.
How much you want to bet he probably did something to his kids, too?
Probably.
Which sucks for them. Hope it doesn't traumatize them forever.
Yeah.
So, you're saying facing decades in prison?
Yep.
Well, if this is true, good riddance. Piece of shit for all I care.
So apparently, he's appealing. So,
well, of course, appeal's gonna probably take months and years before this is all settled. But yeah, if that's the case...
God. Oh, my God. Covenant Eyes, a Christian accountability program that alerts certain people if you look at porn online. Duggar downloaded the content using a workaround that didn't trigger the software, which suggested that the Christian program didn't work and that whoever downloaded the material didn't do it accidentally. Oh, he tried to delete them too. And someone tried to, and he pretending that someone else had downloaded it to frame him, so... Yeah.
Completely.
Oh, he's already lost TLC. Oh, Josh Duggar. Because that's... Yes, Josh Duggar. He molested his sisters. Which means...
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah. Yeah. So... He's got a long history of this, so...
So he's basically the living meme of Alabama, you're saying?
Pretty close. Pretty close, yeah.
And I'm sure that was no consent whatsoever, which makes it worse. Ugh.
Yep. No.
So good riddance if all these are true. Rot for all I care. Oh my god. Piece of shit.
Absolutely.
And like we said, Joshua Fernstein, please get vaccinated if you survive. Because you know, next time you might not be as lucky.
Yes.
Alright, so...
I hope he does, because, God, because then we can keep laughing at making fun of his idiocy.
Yep, and then of course we have all his videos in the past we can make fun of.
Yes, we do.
Fucking idiot.
If he doesn't survive COVID, I will admit that will feel a bit weird for me.
Alright. Alright, so now, on to the final topic of the episode.
What was that? Oh, Trump's demand that Trump supports vaccines.
So of course, as we mentioned earlier when we were talking about Biden doing good things, we were going to talk about if Trump does good things. Well, here's something that Trump is doing that's a good thing, and his supporters are boiling mad over it, which is incredible, as he actually supports vaccines. Because he probably got COVID, so he knows the effects. We actually talked about this months ago when he was at a rally where he said he got vaccinated and his supporters booed him. Some of them even say they don't believe him.
Yeah.
I thought you always believe what Daddy Trump says, remember? So why are you denying him now? Because you don't like what you heard?
Yeah, it's weird.
So now, let's watch Kyle's video on it.
Former President Donald Trump is doing a some sort of tour with Bill O'Reilly. It's kind of hilarious because they've been friends for a while, way before Trump ran for president. And I think Bill O'Reilly probably twisted Trump's arm into doing this. And it's surprisingly, they have like half-empty stadiums when they go and do these things. Now, interestingly, Trump on his own can pull a massive rally. We've seen it time and time again. We've even seen it relatively recently. But for whatever reason, when Bill O'Reilly's there, all of a sudden the numbers plummet. It's like since he's been on Fox News, he's become massively irrelevant, which is funny because he was the number one guy on Fox News in regards to the ratings. So in this conversation, in this back and forth, Bill O'Reilly brings up the vaccine and the booster shot, the third COVID shot. And you're going to be surprised as to, number one, what Bill O'Reilly and what Donald Trump says about it. But then furthermore, the reaction of their own people. Watch.
But look, we did something that was historic. We saved tens of millions of lives worldwide. We, together, all of us, not me, we got a vaccine done, 3 vaccines done, and tremendous therapeutics like Regeneron and other things that have saved a lot of lives. We got a vaccine done in less than 9 months that was supposed to take from 5 to 12 years. Because of that vaccine, millions and millions of people, I think this would have been the Spanish flu of 1917, where up to 100 million people died. This was going to ravage the country far beyond what it is right now. Take credit for it. Take credit for it. It's a great, what we've done is historic. Don't let them take it away. Don't take it away from ourselves. You're playing right into their hands when you sort of like, oh, the vaccine. If you don't want to take it, you shouldn't be forced to take it. No mandates, but take credit because we saved tens of millions of lives. Take credit. Don't let them take that away from you.
Okay, so the president made news.
Do you agree with that? Right?
Both the president and I are vaxxed, and did you get the booster?
Yes.
I got it too. Okay, so...
Oh, don't. That's all. There's a very tiny group of it.
I'm not joking when I say if liberals decided to take the opposite position, if liberals went out there and started being very vocally anti-vax, I think every conservative in this country would get the vaccine. With Trump being pro-vaccine here, and if
that actually might actually be true, believe it or not, because they're that much of a partisan hack.
Liberals were like leaning heavy on, this is the Trump vaccine, I don't trust it, I'm never going to take it. Conservatives would be asking for a 4th shot and a 5th shot already. They'd be using it like it was a drug. So, little reverse psychology may have helped. I mean, I'm being somewhat facetious here, but it's also kind of true. So, look, I can tell you why he did this. Why he did this is not a mystery. Trump, during his campaigns, I should say, he's very good at A/B testing. So he'll go out there and give a rally, and he'll have his list of talking points, and he'll go through them. And whichever talking points get the most applause and the most support, those are the ones that he then uses more in the upcoming speeches and rallies. And so he was able to fine-tune his speech over time, where he was just throwing red meat to his base nonstop at every rally, and they loved that. He would drop the things that weren't popular and do the things that were popular. And listen, he knows, what do we have, 70% of the country, something like that, is fully vaccinated? And maybe an even higher percentage is...
That would actually be a massive increase from last time we talked about. I think fully vaccinated was like only 50-something% nationwide. So that's pretty awesome if 70% are fully vaccinated.
First shot. And so he can see those numbers. He knows that it's an ironclad fact that the overwhelming majority of the country is on the side of the vaccine. So now he's out there doing pro-vaccine stuff. What maybe he didn't realize is that there's a very vocal minority in the country and a vocal larger minority in the Republican Party and among the Trump base that really is super anti.
What?
62.4% fully vaccinated of the population, 74.71 dose.
Oh, okay.
By comparison,
And so
77% of Australia's population is fully vaccinated. We're still getting 100,000 cases a day, but the death count, we're hovering around 20 a day. And that's it.
So that's what he's contending with right there. Listen, most of the crowd was with him, as you could tell from the cheering when he said, did you agree with that? But there was a group that was booing him and kind of heckling him and acting like, no, we don't agree. And listen, I'll say it. As somebody on the left, I'll say it. One of the things that he deserves the most credit for was Operation Warp Speed. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the first breakthroughs in the vaccine came from overseas, came from other countries and other researchers. But listen, to cut red tape that perhaps was a little too onerous in the United States to try to...
Everyone in the United Arab Emirates has been at least partially vaccinated.
You said the UAE?
United Arab Emirates, everyone has got at least one dose.
Not surprised. I'm pretty sure they're kind of smallly populated, like most of those Gulf states.
9 million people.
Oh, that's a lot more than I thought it would be.
People.
That's a lot of people.
I'm guessing that would not include infants, but still, far out.
Yep, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Up the testing and the production. I think that was the right thing to do, given the nature of the pandemic. And I think he's being hyperbolic. He's giving himself too much credit by saying, "Look, this thing could have been the Spanish flu without the vaccine." I don't think the problem with the Spanish flu is that it created what's called a cytokine storm, which is like your immune system freaks out and goes too hard, and it created it in young people. So the Spanish flu actually killed. Funny enough, it came from like Kansas, not Spanish. It's not Spanish, so the wording there is terrible, and it seems like Spain is to blame, but it actually
there was also a variant of Spanish flu that got around a fair way, but had like a 100% death rate. And it killed everybody infected. By literally liquefying their lungs.
Because they would get a cytokine storm. It was more deadly for young people than it was for older people. So I don't think COVID would have been like the Spanish flu with as high of a death rate and as high of the numbers of dead bodies. But look, there's no doubt about it that the vaccine has saved. There was a study that came out not too long ago. I don't remember the numbers, but let me try to pull it up as I'm talking to you here. I think it was 500,000. Let's see. Yes, so there was a new data says 500,000 lives saved by COVID vaccinations in Europe. That's in Europe. There's one that came out in the U.S. This is a study from Yale. U.S. vaccination campaign prevented 279,000 COVID-19 deaths. And this came out, by the way, in July 2021. So he said to that point, 279,000 deaths prevented from COVID because of the vaccines. So, I'm willing to say, in no uncertain terms, that this is probably the best thing that Donald Trump did in office and the thing he deserves the most credit for, even though in other ways his COVID response was sorely lacking and indeed terrible. But he's correct here. He's correct in the broader point. Like, don't be dumb. Get the vaccine. I got the booster shot. We saved lives. Don't let people take that away from you. But I will say the other portion of this, which people are not acknowledging, particularly now on the Democratic side and on the left, there's not as much of an acknowledgement of this. Unfortunately, the COVID skepticism and the vaccine skepticism does in part stem from legitimate grievances, namely the institutional rot and failure.
Yeah,
so,
and Trump was also part of that too.
People, on some level, they instinctively know that Big Pharma owns the government and there's massive corruption, and so they don't trust the authorities anymore because the authorities have failed us time and time and time and time again. Now, in this instance, it happens to be incorrect because the vaccine does work, but it's also correct that the institutions have failed us and that there is corruption and that Big Pharma does own the government.
There you go, Harry.
But
there you go, Thor. There you go, Brogan.
But that's an inconvenient fact for them, remember?
It is.
Again, my phrase that you guys always hear me say is you should be skeptical of everything, but don't be cynical. And a lot of people have crossed that line into cynicism, and now because of that institutional failure, they think like, well, I bet the vaccine doesn't work, or I bet it's a hoax, or whatever.
Basically, like, there's nuances to this.
Credit to Trump here for saying the right thing. But
which we're going to get to about Trump in a moment, too, because Kyle didn't quite explain it fully like I wanted to talk about it.
You could also say, hey, it's a little too late, too late on that front, but some of his people are just they're not going to budge on this, man. They're not going to budge. I don't think it's a deal breaker for him in the sense that even anti-vax Trump supporters will still support him and vote for him in an upcoming election, but
if anything, they might die before then.
There's definitely a strong contingent that is so far gone that they're like, this is inexcusable. I mean, it was all over.
I doubt
think,
they would
like
not vote for a
conservative
no.
TikTok or whatever, big time Trump stands. This is the
percentage
thing.
might.
Made them be like, I'm done with it. Imagine this being the thing that you're like, I can't. He said something reasonable now for once.
Yeah, really.
I mean, for the love of God, we could go through a zillion things he did that were just totally inexcusable. You know, the one that there's a million, but one that sticks out to me is, remember when he randomly on like a Tuesday before brunch decided to assassinate a top Iranian commander who was on the ground fighting ISIS? It's like, that could have easily sparked a hot war, a broader hot war in the region between Iran and Israel. And obviously, it's a clear war crime.
That could have easily escalated things into World War III.
I'm not allowed under international law. And he just randomly did it and acted like, what? I did the right thing. This is great. He was bragging about it. Oh, sweet Jesus, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? And the list goes on and on. We're not going to run through them all in this segment, but this is the thing. This is the thing that you're like, Jesus, I can't.
Yeah, like, really, guys.
I can't.
Trump was so terrible, and, like, the one time where he does something that's somewhat good, you're going to be like, nope, I'm done with you now. Like, come on, dude, really?
Handle this guy. He wants me to be protected from the pandemic that's currently roaring and ripping its way through the country. So, there you have it. What'll be interesting to see is if he continues to say this moving forward. Because, like I said, he A/B tests, and he did get a little bit of pushback when he went with this. So, my guess is he'll probably lean more on the talking point of, like, you have your freedoms, I'm against mandates. He'll do that more than talking about how the vaccine is good, namely because that's the thing that gets the more positive reaction than talking about the vaccine working.
Also, him not being on Twitter actually has helped him somewhat in that regard, too.
So there you have it. Donald Trump being reasonable for once in his life. And
helped him at the same time, I reckon.
A significant portion of his base saying, we hate it.
Alright, that was a very good video. But yeah, what I wanted to say, too, is, like we said earlier, we'll give Biden credit when he does something good. We're going to give Trump credit for doing the right thing. Yeah, that's right for him promoting the vaccine and getting a booster. But there's always a but with, like, the caveats, as we mentioned earlier. That still doesn't change the fact that your policy about COVID was atrocious. You downplayed it, you dismissed it, you called it the Chinese hoax, you called it the Kung flu, which led to racism against Asian Americans. You downplayed vaccines. You
didn't do that. So it would be required to actually counter a bioweapon attack.
You downplayed the vaccines a lot at first and COVID itself, which is a big reason why people don't believe the vaccines work. You are part of that reason why there's a massive anti-vax movement at the moment. So you are still responsible for that, and you getting vaccinated and encouraging others to get vaccinated and all them does not overcome the harm you did in that regard. So that's called being nuanced. Explain you did the right thing, but explain that it doesn't resolve the bad things you did. So what do you guys see about this?
Yeah, I mean, similar with Fauci. Yeah, he said some shit that was wrong. Also note that we weren't actually 100% clear about certain things, and he could have worded things a lot better than he did. But that does not mean that, for example, every single attack on him is now accurate, or that he's patient zero of the pandemic, or anything like that.
You said Fauci? Fauci?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that where he lied about the mask at first, remember?
Yeah.
That was...
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
But he could have explained it a bit better. At least explained better that we're trying to keep some for our health members, but there are some that will at least help stop the spread to some degree. We just got to be thing, which, let's be honest, it didn't help the situation.
And, of course, that also led to distrust in the establishment, which led to distrust in vaccines.
Made the distrustment worse.
Yeah.
And then a ton of political commentators on both sides of the aisle ran with it and were like, all right, we're now going to attack on everything ever, and we're going to say he's wrong on everything ever.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to throw in a mix of actual things with complete and utter conspiracy theories.
Yep. So is that...
why the Chinese bioweapon resurged so much nearly 2021 when it started out on the left, or nominally the left, the hill, and on the right where I don't remember who it was this time, but it's probably like Tucker Carlson or something. But yeah, they started doing taking the gain of function research and linking it to COVID-19 and using it as, see, COVID-19 is a man-manipulated bioweapon, and Anthony Fauci is patient zero of the pandemic. Therefore, he needs to die. Or something like that.
These people are weird.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to talk about this?
Not really.
Alright, so I think that will be all for this episode. So, see you guys next time for episode 35. I cannot wait for that. See you guys then.
Yeah, then.